dry. Page 43. Snapshot. Khazella News. Tensions rise as the Southland enters the third day of the tap-out, but government officials say relief is on the way. Local eyewitness news anchor Lila Snee reads her part that defenders to Chase Bouton, her anchor, who recites his line from a teleprompter. Meanwhile, the cascade effect that has left more than 23 million people without running water shows no sign of abating. For more, we take you to Donovan Lee Silver Lake. As they cut away from the studio to the empty concrete reservoir that used to be Silver Lake, Lila reflects on the trials of her day. Getting to the studio from the Hollywood Hills was a nightmare. She had nearly missed the mid-morning update, and now it looks like the news will be preempting more and more programming, which means she won't be going home anytime soon. Did you hear the head of FEMA was ignoring the governor's call? One of the cameramen had told her earlier. No joke, Hurricane Noah is the only thing that FEMA's radar right now. At that moment, their producer had passed by and admonished them both, as if Lila had been doing anything more than just listening. We deal in news, people, not rumors. The control booth cuts back to the studio from the Silver Lake report, and Lila quickly brings her thoughts back to here and now. Thank you, Donovan. In the midst of the mayhem earlier today, the governor had this to say. They roll tape that the station has been playing over throughout the day, and Lila listens for the umpteenth time, still trying to figure out if there is anything in the governor's voice betraying a deeper truth that he hasn't shared with the press. Page 44. Federal Emergency Management is aware of the situation. The governor says that we are told that tankers of potable water are on their way from as far as Wyoming to satisfy Southern California's immediately critical need. Wyoming, thinks Lila. How long will it take water trucks to get from here to Wyoming? I want to assure the people of Southern California, continues the governor, that help is on the way. Mobile desalination plants are going to be in place up and down the coast to turn seawater into drinking water. Everything possible is being done to alleviate the situation. Thank you. Then he leaves, as always, dodging the barrage of questions. The camera's red light blinks on, catching Lila a bit off guard. But she's a professional. Rather than stumbling, she just pauses, making the moment seem intentional. At this time, she reads, everyone is advised to stay indoors to avoid heat stroke and stay tuned for more information. That's right, Lila, Chase says, and everyone should refrain from any sort of strenuous activity. Exactly. The best way to conserve water right now is to hold on to water your body already has. There were 2 full pitchers of ice water in Lila's dressing room when she arrived that morning. Just thinking about them made her want a nice tall glass. We'll be back right after this. Then they cut to commercial. Page 45. Lila relaxes, looking at her briefings of the upcoming stories. How the zoo is handling the tap out. A man who was shot while trying to get water from a tanker truck, heading for a hospital, and just breaking now the first official death from dehydration in San Bernardino. Chase turns to her, raising an eyebrow. This is bad, he says, with the same vocal inflection with which he might have said, this is fresh, back in the days when he was a voice actor on the fast food commercials. Although rumor had it, he did other sorts of work. But their producer said they deal in news, not rumors. And yet all we do is tell people to stay calm and keep watching. What are we supposed to tell them? Go scream bloody murder, naked through the streets. If it will help them through this, then yes. Well, Chase says with a irksome smile, that would make quite the story. When the afternoon report is over, Lila goes to her dressing room only to find that both pitchers are empty. Someone, or maybe multiple people, have pilfered her water. More is on the way. A nervous intern promises 10 minutes max. But 10 minutes later, neither the water nor the intern are anywhere to be found. In the hallway, Chase is in the line with his agent on the speakerphone, blaring his personal business to anyone who cares. The agent telling him that if he handles this just right, this crisis could propel him to the national stage. A spot on CNN, maybe. I hate that you're using this as your personal pole vault, Lila tells him. Chase just shrugs and continues his conversation. While Lila has her own career ambitions, she's not the jackal that Chase is, scavenging a future from the bones of the present. She looks out the window, trying to get a true view of this crisis. Some 43 stories up, down below there are crowds in the street. Are they demonstrating? Is it water distribution from this high up? She can't tell. Suddenly, she feels claustrophobic in this tower, isolated. The more reports of dehydration, deaths to roll in as the afternoon churns on. They come fast and furious, and she knows they have to report them, and can only imagine what it would be like to be on the listening end, trapped in your neighborhood, wondering if someone on your street is going to be next. And all this time, no water comes to her dressing room. Chase is dry too. There doesn't seem to be water for anyone, and no one promising anything anymore. That's when she gets the idea. It's a long shot, but it's the only idea she's got. Put me in Sky 3 chopper, she tells her producer. What? He looks at her as if she's become delirious. Lila, you're an anchor. You haven't done an aerial report since the days covering traffic. Riots, fires, and gridlock. The stories aren't in here. They're out there. People will respond to it, she says, pretending that, like Chase, this is all about ambition. An anchor in the sky will hold their attention, keep them on us instead of switching channels. No, he tells her, I need you at your desk. But once he's gone, she goes on the roof anyway. Sky 3 chopper is on the helipad. As the traffic reporter's shifts are changing, for a moment she flares at Vietnam, where some of the best reporting ever took place. Of course, it was long before she was born, but she couldn't help but look at that helicopter and imagine that it must have been like before, reporters desperately waiting to get airlifted out of Saigon fell. Kurt, the same pilot who used to take her out in her early old days with the station, leans against the stairwell shaft having a smoke, which is not allowed so close to the helicopter, but he doesn't care. She's hoping that's not the only rule he doesn't care about. Kurt, what's the range of your chopper? About 250 on a full tank, he tells her. Right now, probably closer to 200. Why? She takes a deep breath. I need a favor. 5 minutes later, they're soaring away from downtown LA, heading east. And once she feels they put enough distance between themselves and the newsroom, she tells her producer, taking Sky 3 to Arrowhead, will report on refugee situation. She sends it, thinks for a moment, and then texts, cover for me, or fire me. There, it's done. Whatever happens now, she'll be in one of the few places that still had water. The high lakes might be below their usual water line, but they still are lakes. She takes a deep, relieved breath, feeling a sense of connection to her fellow journalists. All those years ago, as they boarded the helicopters halfway around the world to escape Vietcong. Chapter 4. Page 48. Kelton. No school today. No news on when classes will resume. With just 2 weeks left to the school year, I wonder if we will be going back at all. I try to keep busy by flipping through comic books. For some reason, they don't feel engaging today. I search online for hunting gear to add to my Christmas wish list. Still, not gripping my attention. So I go to watch YouTube videos of chess boxing, a hybrid of fighting sport where you alternate between chess and a round of boxing. It's the one non-weapon related sport that I excel in. It's also the one thing that's landed me in disciplinary Saturday school in my entire high school career, because after doing an oral report on it in English last year, I was cornered by a trio of non-believers and forced to demonstrate the boxing aspect on one of their noses. I would have plummeted them in the chest too, but was hauled into the dean's office. I watched a couple of videos, but today even chess boxing is no match for how listless I feel. It's more than that, though. I'm troubled about the state of the world outside, even considering how prepared we are. It started when Burnside showed up at our door with a gift. Sure, I love the idea of our family's arch enemies turning into a sycophantic stuck-ups. But when the strange actually materializes into reality, it definitely leaves you reeling, much like what now feeling when you look into the dark eyes of the first stag you've brought down, or the triumph despair of shooting a game duck out of the air only for it to fall down a cliff, never to be retrieved for all of eternity. And the more I think about it, the more I realize that everything can be effectively related to hunting. I mean, they do say our every action and inaction is related to some primordial fight or flight hardwiring. For example, winning the affection of a girl is not like shooting a deer. It's important that you approach slowly with caution, and preferably from a posterior angle where they have little to no vision. Women, like deer, can be scared away by a strong musk, which is why it's important to always wear deodorant. Dressing in camouflage doesn't hurt either, because in my experience, girls find camouflage really cool. But all of that aside, I think the most important aspect of attaining a girl of the opposite sex is knowing when to pull the trigger. Metaphorically, that is. You gotta make your move when it feels right, or else you'll come off as creepy. This I know from experience, too. But when it comes to my next-door neighbor, Alyssa Morrow, she feels like the deer I've never been able to shoot. Like I'm so close to making a move, or at least telling her how I feel, but for some reason the moment never feels right. I always figured that if I was in the right place and the right time would present itself. But this year, I hacked the school's computer and arranged to get 5 of my 6 classes with her. I would have done all 6, but that would have been too obvious. On this particular morning, Alyssa's finishing up yard work out front. It looks like she's trying to siphon water out of their irrigation ditch, but that's not going to work. Judging by their brown lawn, their sprinklers have been dry for months, just like most everyone else's. As far as timing goes, I'm starting to get the feeling that it's now or never. So I slip on the desert camouflage tactical vest and head next door. I step outside and locate Alyssa heading towards her garage, struggling to carry some tools. I have positioning to my advantage, so I flank left. As I near, I swallow hard, my nerves making my throat go thick. I need help. I manage to get out. I realize it's the exact same thing I said the other day when they were unloading their ice. I'm hoping she appreciates consistency. That's okay, I think. I got it. Though clearly she doesn't. Perhaps she's trying not to look weak in front of me. So I push forward. Here, Let me at least grab these for you, I say. I take a few wrenches and store them in my pocket. Cargo shorts are essential. Girls love a guy with a lot of pockets. Thanks, she says, as we put the tools away in their respective places in the garage. That's when I catch a whiff of something nasty coming from the house. I must wrinkle my nose because she notices it and looks away, as if I might think the smell is coming from her. Septic problems, I ask. We think sewer gas is backing up in our house because of the lack of water, she tells me. My dad's working on some plumbing modifications to stop it. This, I knew, was inevitable. Probably every house in the neighborhood but ours will be smelling the same right now. But not everyone seems as diligent about doing something about it as Alyssa and her family. Of course, they're going about it all wrong. All you need is zero evaporation trap seal liquid. Pour about a cup into every drain and no sewer gas will get through. And then I add, it's the stuff they use in waterless urinals. She makes an ooh face at me and I realize that was too much information. Anywho, I say, stumbling over my words a bit and looking away involuntarily. I can give you a bottle. We got plenty of it, which is true. But when my dad finds out I gave it away, he'll chew me a new one. But it's worth it because Alyssa lights up. Thanks, Kelton. That's really generous of you. And after seeing her smile like that at me, something compels me to go all in. I hold out my canteen to her. Here, have some, I say. You look thirsty. She cautiously takes the canteen. Are you sure? She asks. I shrug, like it's nothing. What are friends for? She takes a few gulps and hands it back. Then I take a swig. Alyssa and I just shared a canteen. Considering the saliva exchange involved, that's almost like kissing. I suppress a little shiver at the thought. Thank you, Kelton, she says again. Then we stand there in silence. But for the first time, the silence that lingers between us feels a little more natural. It feels good. Without warning, Garrett appears out of what feels like thin air and snatches the canteen from me. Thanks, Kelton, he teases. Don't be rude, Alyssa says. That's not yours. Just then their father enters with a box of dirty rags, and her mother just a few moments later. She smiles, barely able to contain herself. News says there'll be desalination machines along the coast. They'll have a few up and running down at Laguna Beach by this afternoon. What's a desalination machine? Garrett asks. It converts salt water to fresh water, I tell him. They've actually got a big plant down in San Diego, but it's not going to help us. Truth be told, it won't help San Diego much either now. It was forward thinking of them to build a few years back, so for once, it's not a case of too little too late. Instead, it's too little right on time, because at full capacity, it can provide enough water for 8% of San Diego's population, less than 1 in 10 people. Not the solution they hoped it would be. Alyssa's father wipes sweat from his brow. We pay big taxes to fund organizations like FEMA. It's about time they stepped in and did something. Well, it's not like they just let us die of thirst, her mother adds, as if this notion were preposterous, but then waits for someone to chime in with validation. Her father nods in agreement. It's a matter of numbers, he says. After all, California is one of the largest work economies. They need us, and I don't think they would be so stupid as to neglect us. Her father's words stick with me, and though they have merit, I can't help but hear my own father's voice echoing in my head, complaining about the thousands of cumulative mistakes that have led us to this point. The failed consumer rebates, conservation councils, and radical attempts to save water, like the millions of black shades ball Los Angeles released into the reservoir to prevent evaporation, which did nothing. And now I can't decide whether we're ahead whether we're headed towards a real solution or if we're desperately throwing water bottles at the problem. I opened my mouth to raise such a question, but then suddenly stopped myself, remembering what my father always told me about the sheep, their behavior, how their main instinct is to follow members of the herd directly ahead of them, and how being thrown off course even the slightest bit would elect an overwhelming primordial sense of panic that can be deadly. I did a current events presentation once about a flock of 500 sheep somewhere in Turkey that plummeted to their deaths one by one in a ravine because each sheep followed with one directly ahead of the other, never comprehending the bigger picture. Which is worse, I wonder, watching everyone you know fall into a ravine or shaking their reality with such force that it ruins them?